If you've studied the Bible, quite the performer, huh? You might wonder if these millions of gospel followers believe they were inspired by God, truly know this great literary and religious monument that is the Bible. You might not even know. But overall, there are 5 different Bibles, right? The Jewish, Hebrew, Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant versions. For example, the Catholic version includes several Old Testament books that aren't listed. They heal in the Jewish tradition, that don't consider them authentic. Among these, the Song of Solomon, considered an erotic book, and possibly even written by a woman. Catholics also removed it from the Bible, and then, later, they accepted it as inspired. To give you an idea, in the early years of Christianity, there were over 80 Gospels that narrated the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, of his family, and of his disciples as well. Of all these books, only 4 were considered canonical by the Church. The others were deemed apocryphal or not authentic. Given this, it wouldn't be absurd to think that the Bible may have been altered over time, right? Whether intentionally or not, believe it, this work wasn't always as we know it today. Let's start talking about one of the most well-known stories in the Bible, and that it may not have been completely made up. It's the famous story of Jesus being betrayed, drawing a line in the sand between a woman and the Pharisees, who wanted to stone her to death.
Let he who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her.
In most Bibles, this passage appears in the Gospel of John, and it's one of the most quoted in Christianity. The issue is that the oldest copies of the Gospel of John don't have this story. It wasn't found anywhere until just about 400 years after the death of Jesus. The first text to include it was an ancient Greek and Latin translation of the Gospels called
Cool Decks.
Benji, Sao Paulo. The work is notorious for having this odd extra detail that doesn't appear anywhere else. And this particular story is written in a way. Some Bible scholars say it doesn't seem to have been written by the same person who wrote the rest of the book. Many people still argue they present it as a true story, mainly because it seems like the kind of thing Jesus would do. There are plenty of reasons to believe that the famous quote isn't really the word of Jesus. Anyway, let's agree that it's not a passage that was made to harm anyone. But there's a passage that most scholars are sure was altered for the better when interpreted to harm people.
Bad.
In Deuteronomy chapter,
see what I
there
tell you?
seems to be a condemnation directly about homosexuality. The passage reads as follows: "There will be no prostitute, bring daughters of Israel, nor sodomite among the sons of Israel.
Pretending
Do
it's
not bring
me.
the wage of a prostitute, nor the price of a dog, the house of the Lord, your God, for any vow, because both are abominations to the Lord." This passage is quite clear when translated correctly. Right, but many people think otherwise. The word sodomite, it doesn't seem to fit the context, and there's a reason for that. The original word has a meaning closer to prostitute, and it has no connection to homosexuality. In the original Hebrew, the whole verse seems to condemn prostitution for both sexes, instead of being specifically an attack on male homosexuals. They said that when the Bible was translated, they decided to change its meaning specifically to condemn homosexuality. In the 14th chapter of the first epistle to the Corinthians, There is a strange and seemingly random interjection of
misogyny.
which interrupts what would otherwise be cohesive thought. Between verses 34 and 35, it goes like this. Next, women should remain silent in churches. They can't speak but must be submissive, as the law says. If you want to ask about something, you should ask your own husbands home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. When you read in context, it doesn't make much sense. The same chapter of the Bible calls both brothers and sisters to prophesy and speaking in tongues, and it seems to strongly imply that they should be doing these things. In other words, the rest of the text does not say that women should remain silent while in church. So why was this said in the Bible? There is a possible explanation. Some people think that one of the first Christian scholars, luckily, he got tired of his wife and placed the verse of the book, the 4th century manuscript of the book of Corinthians. There's a small note written in pencil near those verses, saying they are a later addition, not originally in the book. And in other ancient manuscripts, these verses appear in different, seemingly random parts of the Bible. Bible still regarding women in 2016. A group of scholars compiled what they called the Standard, enduring English version of the Bible. They declared this version to be the unchangeable Word of God, with every word translated so perfectly that nothing needed to be changed. The truth is, readers hardly had to turn the first page to find something big or mistake in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. When God curses Eve, he says, "Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." But the new version went like this. "Your desire will be contrary to your husband, but he will rule over you." It's a bit different from the original, isn't it? Actually, it's exactly the opposite. This version suggests God cursed women to have terrible marriages for eternity, constantly having all your desires crushed by a husband who shares none of your interests. The translators stood by their decision, despite disapproval from many, including scholars and theologians. Essentially, the translation tells women everywhere that they should not expect to have happy marriages and that they should be content with men, which destroy all your dreams. So who do you complain to? For them, no one should contest the word of God. In the Gospel of Matthew, it is stated that Jesus is the firstborn son. Maria, at least in some translations of the Bible, in others she just calls him son. If you're Catholic, that word makes a big difference. Many Catholics agree that the idea Mary remained a virgin throughout her life, even after having Jesus. Especially, that is why many Catholic Bibles translate that line as a fact. Son, since they reject the idea that Jesus had, it's a tricky position to defend. Since there are some parts in the Bible where Jesus really meets his brothers and talks to them. But some Catholics argue that these stories are also translation errors. The original Greek manuscripts use the word adelphos to refer to Jesus' brothers, which may mean, instead of, almost all of the oldest manuscripts of the book of Matthew clearly use the word firstborn son. Child. Many people believe that the word firstborn was removed by people who wanted to think of Mary as a virgin. altering the Bible so that it fit what they wanted to say. Another thing they tried at all costs to change was the image of Jesus. Okay, it's not about changing the sacred scriptures, because what changed was the understanding of his image. The most common image today is of a white, blue-eyed Jesus Christ, even though all historical evidence points to the contrary. The idea of a white-skinned Christ. White is relatively new and evolved in response to political and social pressures. Various influential artistic portraits of from a Jesus tier helped spread this idea, and indeed, in fact, it has become the most accepted and used worldwide. Although theologians and historians still debate this issue, some scientists have come to a more precise answer. Archaeologists using skeletal evidence and anthropologists, as well as DNA, concluded that Jesus was almost certainly not good white. But he was not black either. The reality probably lies in the middle. And most scientists describe Christ's most likely skin color as olive, more similar to modern Mediterranean peoples. Of course, not all the changes mentioned were meant to harm someone. Generally, those who changed them had their own interest, right? I'm signing off, but see you soon on the Unknown Facts channel. A big hug. Goodbye.